Hey guys, tonight we are not standing on solid ground. Instead, we are stepping onto a deck that won't stop moving. Creaking beneath your feet, the planks shifting like a restless mattress that refuses to stay still. The air smells of salt, tar, and something not entirely fresh, and already your stomach does a little flip, like it is reminding you that you were not designed for this. You probably wouldn't last a day out here, to be honest. And that's not even an insult, it's more like a gentle reality check wrapped in a lullaby. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want, leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Right now, I always find it strangely comforting to imagine people scattered across the world, drifting off to the same sleepy story. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully across the wooden boards, and it feels as if the ground has opinions of its own. Each plank sighs and groans under your weight. Each nail squeaks. Each rope rubs against another. In protest, the ship is alive, or at least it behaves that way, breathing and complaining with every roll of the sea. The horizon, if you dare to look, slides up and down like a stubborn window shade. You thought you would be standing tall, a brave soul with the wind in your hair, but instead you find yourself gripping the railing, knuckles white, whispering promises to the ocean that you will behave if it just calms down for a minute. Around you, the crew is used to this dance. They walk with a swagger, not because they want to look cool, but because their knees have learned to bend with the deck. You, meanwhile, keep staggering like someone learning to roller skate for the first time, trying not to collide with a barrel that's tied down with suspiciously thin rope. The sailors chuckle softly, but not cruelly. They know the ocean will teach you humility faster than they ever could. Your stomach protests again, and you consider that the phrase "finding your sea legs" is less about skill and more about surviving the slow betrayal of your own body. The first few days at sea, many pirates were useless, clutching their bellies and leaning over the side. Some records even mention captains tolerated it, at least for a while, because everyone knew the sickness was inevitable. Historians still debate whether certain remedies like chewing on ginger, sucking lemons, or wearing a pouch of herbs tied to the wrist were effective or just superstition. What seemed certain is that vomiting over the rail was practically a rite of passage. Congratulations, you are now officially part of the club. The ship rolls again, and the rigging above you hums like a giant harp string, wind whistling through taut ropes. The sails, stiff with salt, crack like thunder as they snap against the gusts. Everything is in motion, the floor, the walls, even your own heartbeat trying to keep pace with the waves. There's no pause button, no way to step off. This is your world now, and it does not stand still for anyone. A wave slaps against the hull, sending up a spray of brine that coats your lips. Salty, sharp, almost metallic. You lick it away and imagine how the taste will never leave your mouth, how even bread will soon taste faintly of ocean. One sailor jokes that the sea is generous, it seasons your meals whether you ask for it or not. Another adds that it seasons your clothes, your bed, and your soul. The laughter is weary but genuine. Humor is the only anchor when the world tilts under you. The first night is the hardest. You lie in your hammock, strung between beams. That groan louder than you do, and you realize the ship doesn't simply move its sways with rhythm, a lullaby composed by chaos. Every swing pushes your stomach in a different direction, as if gravity is teasing you. The air is heavy with dampness, infused with tar, rope, fibers, and the faint sweet rot of food stored too long. Somewhere nearby, someone snores. Someone else coughs. A rat scampers across the beam above you, but even that is easier to bear than the rolling. You close your eyes, but the darkness swirls just like the deck, and your thoughts tumble with it. Did pirates ever get used to this? Some say yes. After a week or two, the body learns, the brain gives up its rebellion. Others insist it never goes away completely. Even the toughest captain could be seen leaning against a mast after a storm, pale and green. Imagine a man feared across the seas, reduced to bargaining with his stomach like a nervous schoolboy before a speech. The ocean humbles everyone, equally and without apology. By morning, your legs feel like they belong to someone else. You stumble toward the galley, hoping food might settle things. But the cook offers only hard biscuit and something suspiciously brown in a wooden bowl. Your stomach glares at you as if to say, really, after last night? You nibble anyway, because hunger is relentless, but each bite threatens to stage a rebellion of its own. And still, above it all, the deck rolls, the horizon dips, and the ocean continues its endless joke at your expense. Yet there's a strange comfort in it too. The sound of water rushing past the hull becomes familiar, like the static of a radio. The creak of the timbers, the flap of the sails, the mutter of voices half asleep. They weave together into a kind of background noise that lulls you despite the discomfort. It's not peace, exactly, but it is rhythm. And rhythm eventually feels safe. So you hold the rail again, feeling the ship tilt and groan, and you begin to sway with it. Maybe not gracefully, but at least in surrender. You are part of this. Now the restless mattress, the endless song, the joke you can't escape. You may never quite conquer the sea, but maybe, just maybe, you can learn to nap through it. The night presses down heavy, the deck groaning beneath your feet as the ship tilts one way, then the other, like a drunk who refuses to go home. You try to steady yourself, but your stomach has already started plotting its rebellion. The sea has a cruel sense of humor, rocking you to sleep, only to jolt you awake with that familiar wave of nausea. You lean against a damp wooden beam, the salty spray sticking to your lips, and think of land the way people think of heaven, beautiful, distant, and almost impossible to reach right now. You are not alone in your misery. The sound around you is less the song of adventure and more the chorus of sailors retching over the rail, muttering curses into the darkness. A few have given up and simply sprawled on the planks, clutching their bellies, letting the stars spin. Above them, there is a strange solidarity in it. You, them, and the endless black sea, bound together by the most democratic of tortures, seasickness. Everyone suffers, no matter rank. Even the captain sometimes vanishes behind a barrel, pretending he just needed to check the ropes. Right. The air is thick with tar, wet rope, and the sour smell of half-digested salt pork. Rats scuttle between barrels, probably better adjusted to life at sea than any human here. You imagine one of them, little paws, steady, stomach iron-strung, mocking you in rat language. If only you could trade places for a night, you'd gladly chew hardtack crumbs if it meant your head stopped spinning. It's a common event on every voyage. The first long week when men can't keep food down, when rum becomes medicine and water tastes worse than bilge. You sip anyway, because thirst wins over taste, and you gag, but at least it's something. Some pirates try ginger, if they can find it. Others swear by biting leather straps or chewing stale tobacco. You just try breathing, slow and steady, telling yourself it's only in your head, even as your body laughs at you. What most people don't know is how seasickness could actually shape decisions. Crews sometimes delayed raids because half the men were too ill to fight. Imagine rowing up to a merchant ship, cutlass in hand, only to collapse mid-charge with your breakfast returning for round 2. Not exactly fearsome. Historians still debate. How many potential pirate victories were lost to the simple fact that the human body was never designed to ride a floating wooden roller coaster 24/7. The night deepens. Lanterns swing from their hooks, dripping wax, shadows stretching across damp planks. You hear a mate whispering prayers, not for survival, but just for the nausea to ease. Another jokes weakly, better to die in battle than in vomit. Sad kind of laughter follows, low and exhausted. Humor, thin as it is, keeps despair at bay. You add your own silent joke. Maybe one day someone will invent a pill for this. Until then, you're stuck with the waves. Your eyelids grow heavy, not from comfort, but from sheer exhaustion. The hammock beckons, swaying with the ship, promising rest, but delivering another round of dizziness when you climb in. You curl up, anyway, clutching the rough rope edge, letting the motion cradle you like a cruel lullaby. Sleep comes in fragments, broken by ooze, by footsteps above, by the eternal slap of water against the hull. Yet somehow, between stomach flips and half-dreams, you drift. The seas will not wait for you to recover, and neither will the life you've chosen. But in this moment, in the slow rhythm of sickness and sea, you surrender to the truth every pirate learns. The ocean always wins. And strangely, that realization makes it easier to close your eyes. You wake to the creak of ropes and the smell of salt-soaked wood. The ocean is calm for once, the deck shifting gently beneath you, almost kindly. But then comes the sound you dread more than the cannons of the Navy. The cook's voice announcing breakfast. You sigh, because breakfast here is not the kind of thing you brag about in letters home. You shuffle toward the galley, a cramped wooden cave wedged near the belly of the ship, smoke curling from an iron pot. The cook, a man who always looks like he's lost a bet with the sea, slaps down what passes for food, a biscuit hard enough to chip, a tooth and a slice of salted pork that could probably double as shoe leather. You bite carefully, as though negotiating with the enemy, and feel the crunch, not of crispness, but of tiny weevils wriggling inside. Don't worry, they're extra protein. Everyone says it like a joke, but you can't help noticing how some sailors deliberately crack their biscuits in half just to shake the bugs out. Others shrug and eat them whole, muttering, better alive than moldy. The taste is salt, salt and more salt. It clings to your tongue, burning your lips dry, making you crave fresh water. But of course, that's rationed too. A wooden cup of liquid that tastes suspiciously like old rope is handed to you, and you drink anyway, because thirst is worse than flavor. One sailor swears he saw a tadpole in his once. He still drank it. You tell yourself it was probably just a shadow. Probably, around you, men gnaw silently. The only sounds are teeth scraping and jaws grinding against biscuits. It's not the breakfast of kings. It's survival pressed into a crust. Someone coughs. Someone else mutters about missing bread that actually bends. You laugh softly, the sound swallowed by the sea wind. Humor here is as scarce as fresh fruit, but still, you try. This mealtime misery is a common event, repeated day after day, and strangely, it binds you together. A crew that can endure bad food can endure almost anything. Jokes about biscuits, harder than cannonballs, make the rounds. And some even compete to see who can keep a bite in their mouth the longest before giving up. It's not much, but it passes the hours. The vivid scene unfolds as the cook stirs the pot again, this time ladling out something that might generously be called stew. It sloshes into bowls, grey and oily, with a lump that might once have been pea or pork. It's hard to tell. You watch steam rise, smell smoke mixed with fat, and spoon it in because hunger wins every time. Above your head, lanterns sway, shadows dancing across sweating faces. Each man chewing slowly, pretending this is normal. Here's a lesser-known truth. Sometimes pirates were actually better fed than Navy sailors. With raids, they might capture barrels of dried fruit, fresh bread, or even wine. For a brief few days, the ship became a floating banquet, spirits lifting as quickly as the rum disappeared. But the feast never lasted. Soon enough, it was back to biscuits and salted meat. Historians still debate just how often crews suffered malnutrition, especially scurvy. Some argue pirates were clever at supplementing their diets with citrus stolen from passing ships, while others believe most voyages ended with gums bleeding and teeth loosening like rotten wood. Either way, you learn fast that hunger and illness are as much enemies as any armed vessel. You shift on the rough bench, watching one of your mates tuck a biscuit into his pocket, saving it for later. The rats will probably find it before he does. Another man pulls out a tiny pouch, inside a few precious cloves. He sprinkles them over his pork, and suddenly the whole table leans closer, sniffing like hounds. For a moment, it feels like luxury, the smell sharp and warm against the endless salt. You close your eyes and imagine kitchens ashore, bread baking, butter melting, soups rich with herbs. It almost makes you cry, but you laugh instead, because tears would just taste of salt too. By midday, the sun burns down, sweat dripping, and thirst grows sharper. You line up again for the cask, dipping your cup into water that tastes of damp wood. Some men prefer rum. It dulls the tongue and the mind. But rum is rationed as carefully as water, and fights break out when someone sneaks more than his share. A small drama unfolds when a sailor swears his cup was short. Voices rise, fists clench, but the boatswain steps in, barking louder than the gulls, and the moment dies. Hunger and thirst may be equal, but nothing is worse than losing your ration. Entirely, as evening comes, the pattern repeats. Biscuit, pork, maybe a stew if luck holds. The stars shine above, the waves whisper below, and you gnaw slowly, imagining flavors that aren't there. A lemon, an apple, even a handful of peas, you'd give treasure for them. You finish your biscuit, brushing away crumbs and bugs, licking salt from your fingers because wasting even that feels wrong. And so the day ends as it began, with you chewing something unyielding, your jaw aching, your body tired, your heart oddly steady. You may not love the food, but you live because of it. And in this strange rhythm of chewing, swallowing, and longing for taste, you discover the quiet truth. The ocean does not care if you feast or starve. It only rocks you to sleep, while the biscuits wait for tomorrow. The heat settles heavy on the deck, and you feel your lips drying faster than you can lick them. Thirst is not just an inconvenience here, it is a constant companion. Every time the barrels are cracked open, the air fills with a sour, almost swampy smell. The water that was clean when loaded in port has been sitting for weeks, sometimes months, inside wooden casks, soaking in resin and gathering little green freckles of algae. When you tilt the mug to your mouth, the liquid glugs sluggishly, warm and faintly slimy, coating your tongue in a way that makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, seawater itself would be preferable. Spoiler, it wouldn't. Seawater will kill you much faster, though at least it looks clearer, so you drink what you were given, gagging only slightly, because dehydration is a much crueler master than taste buds. Pirates knew this well. That's why rum, thick and fiery, became more than just an indulgence. Rum turned the foul into bearable. A splash of it, mixed with water, made the liquid safer, or at least numbed you enough to believe it was. Think of it as a medieval energy drink. Instead of electrolytes, you get mild poisoning, and instead of hydration, you get pleasantly dizzy dot. At dusk, the men gather around, ration cups in hand, waiting for that measure of grog, half water, half rum. It's weak enough to keep them functional, strong enough to keep them compliant. The sound of mugs clanking carries across the deck, a little orchestra of survival. You sip yours, and the warmth spreads, burning your throat, settling like a small candle in your belly. For a brief moment, the endless waves seem less threatening, the horizon less sharp. The alcohol has softened everything. A common scene plays out again and again. One sailor tipping his cup too eagerly, coughing, his mates laughing, all of them pretending this is a fine tavern rather than a creaking ship that leaks whenever the wind shifts. They drink, they grin with missing teeth, they live another day. That's the miracle of rum keeping despair just one gulp away from tolerable. But rum was never just for cheer. It was medicine, or at least the closest thing many of these men would ever get to it. Cuts were cleaned with it, sore throats soothed by it, aching joints comforted with it. You get a splinter festering in your palm, pour some rum. You break a tooth, swish rum. Someone has a fever, more rum. If the dosage feels excessive, remember this. It was either rum or nothing. And nothing is far scarier when infection is lurking at every scratch. Now, historians are still unsure how disciplined pirates actually were with these rations. Some argue that captains tried to measure carefully, ensuring everyone got their fair share. Others suggest the whole thing was a free-for-all, with men sneaking sips whenever they could, until the barrel ran dry much earlier than intended. The truth, like the sea itself, is probably murky, shifting with each crew and each voyage. What doesn't change is your body's craving. After days under the hot sun, your lips crack, your skin flakes. You dream of fountains, rivers, even just the drip of rain from the sails. Sometimes storms deliver. Buckets are set out, tongues stretched open, men laughing as they drink straight from the sky. Rainwater tastes like salvation, cool and sharp, washing away the sour aftertaste of foul muck. But those storms don't always come, and thirst keeps chewing at you. Asterisk, a lesser-known trick. Sailors sometimes dropped a piece of toasted bread into the cask, believing the charcoal would absorb bad flavors. Did it work? Probably not as well as they hoped. But the ritual itself brought a kind of comfort, the belief that you were fighting back against decay. You might even feel proud, standing there, watching crumbs swirl like little brown rafts in the greenish water, convincing yourself that you've just invented purification. The smell of rum lingers on everyone. Their sweat carries it, their breath leaks it, their songs slur it. At night, when the deck grows quieter, you lie in your hammock listening to the slow rise and fall of snores around you, and each one carries that unmistakable tang of fermented sugar. The ship becomes not just wood and sail, but an enormous barrel, floating endlessly, with all of you steeping inside. You wonder, half dreaming, how different your fate would be if the barrels had been filled with fresh oranges instead. Scurvy might not ravage your gums, your breath might not rot, and your teeth might actually stay in your skull. But oranges don't keep for months, and rum always waits. That's the irony. In trying to survive thirst, you set yourself up for other, slower deaths. Your hand curls around the mug again. The wood is rough, the rim stained, but it feels like an anchor to sanity. One swallow and the world dulls, another swallow and the sea seems calmer. Your stomach still churns from the motion of the ship, but at least your head sways more happily. And that's how another night begins, salt air filling your lungs, thirst never leaving but always delayed, cup by cup. The first heave always takes you by surprise. One moment you're staring at the horizon, convincing yourself that maybe, just maybe, you've gotten used to the rhythm of the ship. The next, your stomach decides to remind you that balance is an illusion and dignity is optional. You lean over the rail, knuckles white, eyes watering, watching yesterday's hard biscuit take a second, far less graceful voyage. The sea accepts. It, without complaint. The gulls, circling above, seem almost grateful for the offering. Seasickness is not a single bad day. It is a routine, a pattern carved into your hours, as reliable as the tides. Wake up, stomach lurch, eat, chew twice, regret. Instantly, try to rest. The hammock swings, and suddenly you're floating through some nightmare carnival ride. Even the smell of food-salted pork sweating in the sun, onions softening into sweetness, makes your throat tighten in warning. You learn quickly to avoid the galley unless you like sprinting for the rail. And here's the cruel trick. Some men never get sick at all. They lounge with smug grins, gnawing happily on meat, laughing as they drain their ration of rum. They slap you on the back while you lean over the side, whispering unhelpful encouragement like, "Don't worry, it gets better after the first year." You'd glare at them if you weren't so busy trying not to collapse headfirst into the Atlantic. The daily scene is almost comical, if it weren't so miserable. Along the deck, men spaced out like ornaments, each bent double over the railing, stomachs emptying in rhythm with the waves. The sound is not musical, but it is oddly communal, a choir of retching that even the most hardened pirate learns to ignore. The air is thick with salt, sweat, and bile. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve, notice it's already stiff with old stains, and sigh. Somewhere deep down, you wonder if you'll ever taste food properly again. A lesser-known fact, some captains actually carried dried ginger or peppermint as a remedy, especially when trade routes made such luxuries available. A sailor chewing ginger root might find the nausea easing, though the spice burned his tongue and left a sharp tang on his lips. Did it work? Sometimes, other times, the sailor would swear it made things worse. Remedies, like the sea itself, were unpredictable, of course. No pirate ever wanted to look weak. Seasickness became an unspoken shame, a mark you tried to hide. You wipe your mouth, straighten up, pretend that what just happened was nothing at all. You force yourself to tie knots, scrub the deck, sing with the others, anything to show you're not beaten. Pride can keep a man on his feet long after his stomach has surrendered. You mutter, "I'm fine," Even as your legs tremble and your lips go green, the lie becomes part of the routine. Now, scholars still argue about whether seasickness was seen as a minor inconvenience or a dangerous weakness. Some accounts describe crews laughing it off, mocking each other with cruel affection. Others suggest prolonged illness could make a sailor useless, even endanger the whole crew if too many men were incapacitated during a storm. The truth is, likely somewhere in between half ridicule, half genuine fear that the sea could hollow you out from the inside. The waves never stop. After all, day and night, the ship sways, rises, falls. The boards creak beneath your feet, the ropes groan overhead. Even when you close your eyes, the motion follows you into dreams. You wake sweating, clutching the hammock as if it's trying to throw you onto the floor. The nausea doesn't ask permission. It lives in your bones now. There are lighter moments, of course. One sailor invents games, betting how long the newcomer will last before leaning over the rail. Another composes songs with lyrics no one dares repeat to the captain, rhyming swell with smell and gut with, well, you can guess. You laugh between heaves, because laughing is easier than crying. Even misery becomes a kind of entertainment when there's no land in sight. Every so often, a cruelly calm day arrives. The sea flattens, the wind slows, and for a few blissful hours your stomach settles. Food tastes almost edible, and you let yourself hope it's over. But then the swell returns, a deep rolling undercurrent, and hope vanishes with the next wave. You're back at the rail, gripping it slick with spray, muttering to yourself about how land was probably overrated anyway. The smell of vomit never really leaves the ship. It soaks into the planks, lingers in the seams. The deckhands scrub. The rain washes, but the scent remains faint and sour, woven into the very fabric of the voyage. At night, when you lie half asleep, the breeze carries it back to you, reminding you that tomorrow will not be kinder. One joke makes the rounds. The sea wants her share of every meal, and she takes it straight from your mouth. You chuckle weakly because there's truth in it. The ocean devours, whether through storms, hunger, or simply shaking you until your insides revolt. You grip your mug of rum tighter, sipping carefully, praying it stays down. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does still. Still, there is endurance in routine. You vomit, you wipe your face, you keep working. You learn to breathe slower, to focus on the horizon, to chew ginger if you're lucky enough to have it. The body adapts, or at least resigns itself. Eventually, the rhythm of sickness becomes background noise, less terrifying, almost tolerable. Almost. And so another day passes on the endless water, your stomach rebelling, your pride clinging, your laughter bitter but real. Seasickness, like hunger and thirst, is simply part of life here. Not dramatic, not heroic, just constant. You close your eyes, swallow hard, and wait for the next wave, knowing it will come, and you will bend, and you will carry on anyway. The scratching wakes you before dawn. Not the creak of the ship or the slap of waves, but that tiny shuffle in the dark that makes your skin crawl. You pull the thin blanket closer, though it does nothing, and blink into the lantern-lit shadows. There, by the ropes coiled neat as a sailor's braid, a pair of glowing eyes dart and vanish. Rats again, always rats. They know the ship better than you do, racing up and down the rigging like acrobats in some rodent circus you never paid to. See, you almost admire them in a sick way, the way they leap from beam to beam without a second thought, their tails like thin ropes themselves. almost admirablant, till you remember they've probably been gnawing through your bag of biscuits. The bread you were saving, already stiff enough to hammer a nail, holds surprises now. You crack a piece and see the little legs scatter. Cockroaches, fast and shameless, hiding in flour barrels and crawling over salted meat as though they paid for passage. You hold it in your hand, hesitate, then bite anyway. Hunger has a way of making the crunch seem less personal. Still, you can't help but think that tonight you'll dream of tiny antennae brushing against your tongue. Delicious, sailors joke about it, because what else can they do? A man swears the rats are growing bold enough to nibble his toes while he sleeps. Another says he trained one to fetch crumbs like a loyal dog. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's either laugh or scream. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you imagine these creatures plotting, meeting at midnight near the galley to divide the ship into territories. The forecastle belongs to them, the biscuit barrel's theirs, and you're just the inconvenient guest. There's a strange comfort in routine infestation, if you can call it that. The scratching behind planks, the sudden dart across your blanket, the flutter of wings from weevils erupting like dusted, all becomes background noise. The truth is, sailors expected it. Wooden ships were floating pantries for pests, and no captain could ever claim his vessel was clean. The presence of vermin was almost a badge of authenticity. If you weren't sharing your bed with a rat, were you even really at sea? What no one admits loudly is how these animals sometimes became unexpected companions. Men starving on long voyages sometimes roasted rats over a small flame, not that anyone likes to remember. Roach powder, ground and bitter, found its way into makeshift remedies, though whether it cured or killed, nobody knew. The line between survival and disgust blurred every day. Now, historians still puzzle over whether captains truly tried to fight these infestations with cats. Some accounts mention ships boasting mousers, sleek felines stalking the dark corners. Others claim cats were too precious or too cursed symbols of witchcraft at sea, avoided as bad luck. You roll this around in your mind while listening to the latest squeak above your hammock, wondering which version of history you'd rather believe. Personally, you'd take the cat. The smell of pest life adds another layer to the air. Salt, tar, sweat, and always that faint sharp tang of droppings in the corners. You breathe it in because you have no choice, lungs adjusting to a cocktail that would make someone on land gag in minutes. And maybe you gag a little anyway, leaning over the rail with eyes watering, telling yourself it's seasickness, when really it's the thought of rat urine soaking through the bread you'll eat tomorrow. Still, you adapt. You learn to shake out your blanket before lying down, to seal your bag with a bit of rope, to pretend you don't see the antenna twitching by your cup. Some men give their nightly visitors names. One rat, with half a tail, is called Old Stump. Another, fat and fearless, is dubbed Captain. Strange how the mind copes, making friends of enemies when you have nowhere else to turn. You even start to nod off to the rhythm of claws scuttling overhead, like a lullaby no sane person would ever request. Of course, there are moments when it overwhelms you. The sudden feeling of a cockroach crawling over your arm, the sick drop of the stomach as something brushes your cheek in the dark. You slap, curse, roll over, then breathe deep, forcing calm. Out here, fury wastes energy. Out here, you learn that coexistence with vermin is not optional. You share this ship with them as surely as you share it with your crewmates. And if you close your eyes, really close them, the sounds merge. Wood creaking, water lapping, rats racing. You imagine The pests aren't even there, just echoes of the ocean itself. It's almost soothing in a twisted way, as if the ship is alive and breathing with you. You let your mind drift, knowing tomorrow you'll wake to the same scratching, the same little darting shadows, and you'll mutter the same curse under your breath before getting on with another day of survival. Because whether you like it or not, pests are the silent crew of every voyage, and you, unwillingly, are their neighbor. The word pirate makes you think of chaos cutlasses, flashing, men screaming, everyone grabbing what they can. But the truth hits you differently. When you live it, order exists here, though not the kind you'd expect. You're handed a set of rules, scratched out on parchment, smudged with grease and rum. Strange, isn't it, that the men who rob ships have more paperwork than you thought? You trace the lines with your finger, the lantern light flickering, and realize this is less lawless freefall and more floating republic. Who knew? They call it the Articles. Each crew writes their own, like a constitution at sea. First rule, spoils are divided evenly, except for the captain and the quartermaster, who get a little more, but not much. Imagine Itmen, who answer to no king, still demand fairness from each other. You almost laugh at the thought, but then again, it makes sense. Nothing tears a crew apart faster than someone pocketing more than his share. Better to agree before the plunder begins. Eyes slide further down. Pay for injuries is listed right there. Lose an arm, compensation, lose a leg. More, even blindness earns you a portion, enough to keep you alive, while others swing from ropes. It's grim comfort, but comfort all the same. You suddenly realize, these cutthroats invented what looks suspiciously like workers' compensation centuries, before any civilized government thought of it. You wonder what that says about society on land, then decide you don't want to know. The strangest part is how democratic it feels. Captains are chosen by vote, not birth. They lead in battle, but step aside when the spoils are counted. If a captain grows too cruel or too greedy, the crew can vote him out faster than any parliament back home. You feel the weight of that power, sitting around a barrel with rough men, each raising a hand. One vote, no matter if you've been at sea 20 years or 2 weeks, and for once in your life, your opinion matters. Shocking, isn't it? Of course, it's not all noble fairness. Break the rules and punishment is brutal. Steal from your brothers, and you'll find yourself marooned on some nameless sandbank with a pistol and a single shot, though, if you're lucky. They'll just whip you until your back burns. Try to desert in the middle of a raid, and you might not live long enough to regret it. Discipline, yes, but delivered with the sharp end of survival. Still, the Articles carry an odd dignity. Men sign their names, or mark an X. If they can't write hand, those scrawls mean something out here. They bind strangers together, turn a mob into a crew. You fold the parchment back, tucking it under the candle stub, and realize you're not living in anarchy at all. You're living under one of the few systems where everyone truly has a say. Scholars still argue whether these pirate codes were inspired by sailors' traditions or if they sprang up out of necessity. The pure logic of men who needed order without kings. Some claim the Articles influenced later democratic ideals, while others roll their eyes and say it was just thieves keeping their loot tidy. You shrug, listening to the low hum of dice rolling in the corner, and think maybe both would be true. History rarely gives you a neat answer. A vivid memory clings. A storm night when lightning split the sky and water poured through the deck seams. The captain barked orders, but only because the crew allowed him to. The quartermaster, chosen by vote, shouted over him. Men argued, cursed, then somehow found a rhythm, hauling ropes, patching sails, saving the ship by sheer stubborn unity. No king could command that. It was born from agreement, not obedience. And when the storm passed, soaked and shaking, you almost felt proud to belong to this unlikely brotherhood. There's a joke sailors share. A king's crown is heavy, but a pirate's vote is heavier. You smirk at the thought, wiping sea spray from your face, because here in the belly of this creaking ship, your voice counts for something. Treasure may glitter, rum may warm the bones, but it's the rules, yes, the rules that keep the chaos from swallowing you whole. And so you settle into this strange democracy of the sea, half shocked, half amused, all the while clutching your share of plunder like it's proof that for once you're living under laws. You actually helped write the sea has no calendar, no mercy, and certainly no weekends. Your life is carved into Watcher's endless cycles of labor and half-sleep that blur until you're not sure whether it's dawn or dusk. The bell clangs sharp against the wind, and your body moves before your mind does, like a puppet pulled. From its cot, eyes sting, hands ache, but up you go. There's always something to scrub, to mend, to haul. Always, you start at the deck, brush in hand, salt water stinging the cuts across your knuckles. The planks are never clean enough. Salt crusts everything, bloodstains from yesterday's butchery cling. And the ship smells like a mixture of wet rope, tar, and too many men living too close. You lean into the scrubbing until your back protests and someone shouts for you to hurry, because there's always another task waiting. Climbing the mast comes next. Rope burns your palms. Wood splinters lodge in your skin, and the whole ship sways beneath you like a drunk staggering home. Up there, high above the deck, the wind slaps your face raw and your stomach churns. If you look down, but you look anyway because it's impossible not to. Men look like ants, waves like mountains, and you're reminded again that this floating world is smaller than it feels. The mast creaks, the sails snap, and you cling on, praying your fingers don't betray you. Then comes the watch. Hours of staring at a horizon that never changes, eyes straining, scanning for a speck of sail, a flicker of color, a ripple that doesn't belong. You'd think it would be boring, but no. The silence grows heavy, filled with the weight of what might appear. A merchant ship means riches, a navy vessel means death, and sometimes nothing at all, which might be the cruelest. Of all outcomes, the men beside you shift, cough, mutter half-formed jokes. One gnaws on a biscuit so stale it could double as a hammer. Another scratches at a rash that looks worse every day. You laugh weakly at the jokes, but mostly you stare, willing your eyes to pierce the mist. Someone once told you that staring at the horizon makes time pass faster. They lie docked, and when the watch ends, you don't rest. You patch sails, scrape barnacles from the hull, haul buckets of seawater up and down until your arms are jelly. Work never stops, it just changes shape. You live on a ship that constantly breaks, its self-wood swells, rope frays, iron rusts. If you stop for even a day, the sea eats it whole. So you keep moving, keep fixing, keep sweating, and hope you don't collapse before the bell rings again. Oddly enough, historians still can't agree whether pirate crews had harsher schedules than naval ships, or whether the democratic articles meant shifts were more balanced. Some claim pirates shared labor fairly, while others argue the drudgery still fell hardest on the newest hands, like you. Either way, your back doesn't care what the academics think. It hurts the same that our moments burned into you, like the time you hauled on a rope until your shoulders screamed, the sun blazing, sweat mixing with salt spray until you couldn't tell the difference. Your hand slipped, rope lashed your wrist, and the man next to you laughed instead of helping. "Don't let go," he said, grin missing 3 teeth. "The sea loves a fool." You didn't. You held on. Barely Dot or the night watch under a moon that hung like a cracked coin. You stood, eyelids heavy, staring at nothing, when a pod of dolphins cut through the waves, silverbacks flashing. For a brief, shimmering moment, the work felt almost worth it. Almost. Then the quartermaster barked at you to keep your eyes forward, and the spell snapped, back to staring at the same blank dark. There's a cruel humor in it all. You left land dreaming of freedom, of treasure, glittering in the sun, of rum flowing like rivers. Instead, you spend your days hauling buckets and your nights squinting into fog. Freedom tastes a lot like sweat, and treasure looks suspiciously like blisters. You chuckle under your breath at the thought, then swallow it because laughter wastes energy you don't have, and still you keep going. Shift after shift, climb after climb, scrape after scrape, because that's the rhythm of the ship, and rhythm is survival. You fall into it, the endless drumbeat of labor, until your body works on instinct and your mind drifts somewhere else entirely. Maybe that's the trick, not fighting it, but letting the days roll over you, as steady and relentless as the sea itself. And so you bend your back once more, eyes fixed on the horizon, ears straining for the bell. Because out here, on this fragile wooden island, work and watch are the only constants, and the sea, ever patient, waits for you to falter. The sky doesn't darken all at once. It creeps in slowly, like ink spilled across parchment. One moment you're squinting at a pale horizon, the next you notice the wind biting sharper, the gulls vanishing as if they know something you don't. Then the first growl rolls out of the clouds, low and mean, and you realize you've just stepped into the sea's favorite game, survival. The order comes before you even have time to curse. Haul the sails, tie down the guns, secure the bows. Your hands fumble with soaked rope, slick as eel skin, while the deck tilts beneath you like some drunk giant's idea of fun. The wind howls so loud you can't even hear yourself swear, which honestly feels unfair. And then rain, not soft, pleasant rain. No, this is sharp, slashing rain that smacks your face like a fist, steals your breath and soaks you through before you blink. Within minutes, you're drenched, shivering, rope biting into your palms as the sail above thrashes like a beast trying to tear itself free. The waves rise, higher and higher, until the ship feels like a toy tossed by a cruel child. Each swell lifts you toward the sky, gives you half a second to glimpse the endless black horizon, then drops you like a stone into a chasm of foaming water. Your stomach climbs into your throat and stays there. Somewhere, a man vomits over the rail. It's hard to tell whether it's seasickness or sheer terror. Probably both. The mast groans. The wood shudders with every crash, every lash of the sea. You glance upward, half convinced it'll snap. If it does, that's it. The storm wins. A sail tears with a sound like fabric and bone together, and the quartermaster bellows curses that would shame the devil. And you cling to the rigging, praying the rope holds, your fingers stiff with salt and fear. The deck below is chaos, men slipping, scrambling, tying, shouting. One poor fool slides nearly the length of the deck before slamming into a barrel, teeth, scattering like glass. Nobody stops to check him. There's no time. There's a strange fact he once overheard. Some sailors swore storms were worse near the tropics, where sudden squalls could snap a mast clean in seconds, while others argued the North Atlantic was crueler, all icy spray and endless grey. Scholars argue it too, though whether the tropics or the northern waters were truly more deadly still sparks long, dull debates in their papers. Out here staring death in the face, the argument feels a little academic. Still, you notice things. In the chaos, lightning splits the sky, forking across the clouds in veins of silver blue. For a heartbeat, the world is lit as bright as Dather, ship caught mid-lurch, faces twisted with fear, eyes wide, ropes taut, and then darkness again. Thicker than before, like the sea swallowed the light hole. The storm has its cruel humour. A barrel breaks free, rolling down the deck as though it too wants to abandon ship. You nearly laugh, except you're too busy holding on for dear life. Someone shouts, "Hold fast," which is either solid advice or the understatement of the century. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time is shredded in storms, broken into jolts of fear and sudden crashes. At some point, you find yourself bailing water, your arms moving without thought, while your mind floats somewhere outside your body. The sea roars, the ship groans, and you think this is what it feels like to be very small. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the storm breaks. The rain eases, the wind falters, the clouds peel apart like curtains reluctantly parting. Light filters through, pale and weak, but still light. You sag against the rail, drenched, trembling, your muscles screaming. Around you, the crew breathes, in ragged unison, half in relief, half in disbelief that the ship is still afloat. The deck is wreckage, ropes tangled, wood splintered, sails shredded. Men limp, cough, spit blood, count fingers. And yet, somehow, the ship floats. She always does, until one day she doesn't. That thought lingers in the back of your mind, as stubborn as the salt crusting your lips. You tilt your face to the pale sun, shivering as warmth creeps back inch by inch. The storm has passed, leaving you rattled but alive. The sea, for now, rests. But you know it's not kindness, just patience. Because storms don't end, they wait. And sooner or later, the sky will blacken again. It begins quietly, almost politely. A little stiffness in your knees, a nagging ache in your gums when you bite into the ship's stale biscuit. You tell yourself it's nothing, just the price of hard living at sea. But the truth creeps in slowly, the way salt works its way into every seam of the ship. You're not just tired, you're sick. The coughs start first. They echo across the hammocks at night, wet and hollow, each one reminding you that no one here has the cure. A man hacks so hard he spits up flecks of blood, then laughs weakly as if to say, "See, still alive, for now." His laugh turns to another cough, and the hammock creaks under his shaking frame. Then there are the gums, soft, swollen, bleeding at the slightest touch. You taste iron every time you chew, and sometimes your teeth feel loose, as if the sea itself is prying them out one by one. Some men stop eating altogether, their mouths too painful, their bellies left to growl in vain. A cruel joke, really starving while surrounded by barrels of food. The joints stiffen, too. Knees that once bent with ease now grind and creak. Shoulders ache when you climb rigging. Fingers swell like overripe fruit. You see hardened sailors weep as they try to tie knots their hands no longer obey. And when a man collapses, there's no doctor to catch him. Only the grim knowledge that you'll haul his body overboard soon enough. A strange, half-forgotten fact drifts through your mind. Some ships carried citrus syrup, or even lemon juice, tucked away in little casks. The catch: it often spoiled in the heat, or was hoarded by officers who valued their own guns more than yours. And so the lower decks rotted quietly, tooth by tooth. The ship's surgeon, if you're unlucky enough to have one of us little comfort. His tools gleam with menace, his cures taste of chalk and bitterness. And more often than not, he prescribes rest you'll never get. He doles out vinegar like it's salvation, though you suspect it's just punishment in a bottle. The truth: he's as helpless as you are, and he knows it. Historians, in their infinite fondness for argument, still quarrel over who first noticed the power of citrus fruit against scurvy. Was it the Portuguese slipping oranges aboard their long voyages? Was it James Lind with his neat little experiment of lemons and limes in the 18th century? Or was it older still, knowledge lost and rediscovered like so many shipwrecks? They disagree, of course. Meanwhile, your gums are too busy bleeding to care. The smell of sickness spreads below deck, a sour, metallic temps that clings to the hammocks and blankets layered over sweat and salt. You try to breathe shallowly to keep the stink of decay out of your lungs, but it's hopeless. It seeps into you, reminding you of what waits if the voyage drags on too long. Yet somehow, life goes on. A man still hums while mending a shirt. His gums roar, but his tune steady. Another still jokes that he'd rather lose his teeth than his rum ration. At least, I can still swallow. You laugh, weakly, because humor is the last medicine left. And it works, a little, until the next spasm of coughing doubles you over. You take in the sea air, sharp and endless, and wonder how it can smell so clean while your body rots inside. You chew on hardtack, ignore the bleeding, and pull another rope with aching joints. Because out here, illness isn't an exception. It's part of the routine. A routine as steady as the tide, as cruel as the salt. And still, you wake each day. Still, you haul, scrub, climb, and endure. Because the ship demands it. Because the sea doesn't care about your bleeding gums. Because even when sickness gnaws at you, the voyage goes on, and you with it. You lean against the rough rail of the ship, your body still aching from the long night of heaving ropes and the dull throb in your gums that refuses to leave. The ocean sways beneath you, endlessly grey, endlessly the same. And yet sometimes, in this monotony, a strange kind of light sneaks in. It isn't gold coins or buried treasure, sorry to disappoint but little ridiculous things. You notice one of the lads strumming on a cracked fiddle, trying to wrestle a melody from strings that sound more like squealing gulls than music. Still, you laugh. It's laughter that feels stolen, like it shouldn't belong out here. But somehow it does. A common scene unfolds on these voyages. Men gathered in a loose circle, clapping along, stomping boots on damp planks to the rhythm of a shanty. The words are crude, the rhymes clumsy, but the sound breaks through the ceaseless slap of waves. You join in, half-hearted at first, then louder. For a few minutes, seasickness seems far away, replaced by the illusion that you're back on land, somewhere with firelight and ale, not with salt spray biting at your face. Historians still argue whether pirates really sang the same shanties we hear in films, or whether much of it has been embroidered later for romance. Maybe the truth is simpler. Men who worked together sang together, even if the tune was nothing more than a mumble in the dark. Either way, you discover it's less about the song and more about the moment it gives a rhythm for aching arms, and a shared breath that almost feels like family. You take in the sight of one of the youngest deckhands trying to carve a piece of driftwood with his dull knife. He insists he's making a mermaid, though to your tired eyes it looks suspiciously like a club-footed chicken. Still, he guards it as though it were priceless. Such carvings often became charms, talismans against bad luck. Did they work? Well, given the fact that you're still afloat despite last week's storm, maybe there's something to it. Or maybe it's just that superstition is better than despair. And then there are the dolphins. Not the mystical kind painted in romantic canvases, but real, slick-backed, darting alongside the bow. The moment someone shouts their arrival, every man who can walks, limps, or crawls to the rail. For a while, you're children again, pointing, laughing, arguing over whose splash was bigger. It's silly, yes, but it's also precious. Imagine grown men who face cannons and cutlasses, yet who light up like lanterns at the sight of a fish with a grin. There are other small joys, more practical ones. On rare occasions, when the cook decides to be generous or when rats have stolen less than usual, you might find a scrap of dried fruit slipped into the meal. A fig, perhaps, tough and shriveled, yes, but still sweet, and so unexpected it nearly makes you weep. Someone once claimed a single fig was enough to make him believe paradise was real. He might have been joking, or maybe not, and humor, of course. Pirates were nothing if not inventive with jokes, even the kind that wouldn't pass in polite society. You hear one about a parrot who refuses to say pieces of 8 and instead demands pieces of cake. The delivery is terrible, but after days of silence broken only by creaking timber, it earns wheezing laughter. Another time, a man claims he saw a ghost sitting atop the mast. The ghost turned out to be a seagull with one leg tucked in, but he milks the story for days, insisting it whispered curses in Latin. Needless to say, his Latin vocabulary extends about as far as rum. There's a truth here, unspoken yet felt. Joy is not about grand feasts or piles of silver. It's about grabbing at scraps of humanity in a world that constantly tries to strip you down to mere survival. You take those scraps wherever they appear, no matter how foolish. A shared grin over weevil bread, a story told badly but earnestly, a glimpse of the horizon tinged with orange at dawn that makes you forget, just briefly, the smell of mildew in your hammock. Did every crew find such moments? Some accounts suggest so, others are quieter, as though joy didn't fit the narrative of blood and plunder. And yet, it seems impossible that men could live months at sea, crammed into wooden coffins, without inventing their own sparks of relief. Some scholars whisper that these tiny pleasures were the glue that kept crews from splintering apart. After all, if the only thing binding you was treasure, wouldn't the boredom gnaw harder than hunger? So you sit, humming under your breath, the faint tune barely carrying in the wind. Someone beside you drums, fingers on the rail, keeping time. Another yawns, muttering about missing his bed on land, though none of you quite believe he ever owned one. That's the irony, isn't it? The life people imagine for pirates is one of endless adventure, swords flashing, chests clanking with gold. But the reality, adventure is mostly waiting, and gold is mostly a rumor. What's real are the tiny interruptions to misery, the giggles, the dolphins, the songs no one remembers the words to. You close your eyes for a moment, rocking with the ship. Around you, voices soften. Someone snores already, despite the racket. Someone else is still trying to fix his fiddle, convinced it'll sound better if he tightens the string until it snaps. You don't stop him. Let him have his hope. Asterisk and so, against all logic, you drift into something almost like peace. Almost. The ship drifts into harbor after weeks at sea, creaking and groaning like some overworked old horse finally allowed to pause. You step off the gangplank, and for a brief moment, your legs forget how to be legs. The dock beneath your boots sways, though it isn't moving at all. Your body has been taught too well by the rolling sea. You laugh to yourself, or maybe it's just a groan disguised as a laugh, because even the ground feels like it's conspiring against you. And then the smells hit. Not the rank, familiar perfume of damp wood and salt-stained canvas, but roasted spices curling from market stalls, sweat mingled with perfumes you can't name, strange fish sizzling over open coals. Every port seems to have its own orchestra of scents, and you never quite know if you should be enchanted or nauseated, often both at once. Here, the markets bloom with colour, fabrics dyed in hues brighter than any sailcloth, baskets of fruits with names you don't recognise, the skins glistening like jewels. You pick one up some star-shaped thing with too many ridges and bite. The taste bursts sharp and sweet, and suddenly you understand why sailors sometimes desert right there in the bazaar. A single bite of land's abundance can undo weeks of salted beef and ship's biscuit. Of course, port life is never only indulgence. The taverns are loud, the coin runs thin, and sailors vanish into back alleys, never to return. You and your crew are told to stick together, though everyone knows that advice lasts about as long as the first mug of ale. It's common, almost expected, that a brawl will break out between men who, just hours earlier, were climbing rigging side by side. At least the local watch usually looks the other way. Provided a few coins change hands, you find yourself lingering at the edge of a crowd where a street performer juggles knives, each blade catching the lantern light in sharp flashes. Children dart between legs, shouting in languages you don't understand. A woman with painted hands offers charms against storms, claiming the seas will obey if you tie her trinket to the mast. Do you believe her? Not really. But the thought of karma, voyages of fewer nights spent dangling over the rail, makes you buy one anyway. The charm, of course, falls apart before you even leave harbour. There's a quieter moment, too, when you slip into a shabby and a musician plucks at a stringed instrument that looks like it was cobbled together from driftwood and spare rope. The tune is slow, almost mournful, yet somehow soothing. You close your eyes and imagine being anyone but yourself, land dweller with a steady roof, perhaps. The irony isn't lost on you. Pirates raid ships for treasure. Yet the real luxury is the stillness of 4 unmoving walls. Did you know that some pirates, when they came to port, actually ran schools for their children, or even invested in local shops under false names? Few believe it, but records hint at these double lives de rore on the sea, shopkeeper on land. Historians still argue whether these stories are exaggerations, moral tales, or glimpses of a strange kind of respectability hidden beneath rum and powder smoke. Not that you see much respectability tonight. You stumble back to the docks, rum, warming your throat, purse lighter than you'd like. Someone singing off-key behind you, one of your mates. Most likely, and you wonder if you'll all even make it back on board before the tide pulls the ship out. The night air tastes of frying fish, cheap tobacco, and the faint promise that tomorrow will be harder than today. You chuckle softly. Ports are always the same. A brief illusion of choice. A theatre where pirates pretend to be free men rather than sea-tossed labourers bound to the next horizon. For a few hours, you get to pretend, too. Then the gangplank creaks again, and your boots step back onto wood that won't stop moving. The land fades behind you, the smells dissolve into salt spray, and the horizon yawns open, patient and endless. Because no matter how exotic the markets, no matter how fleeting the joys, the sea always calls you back, louder, hungrier, and far less forgiving. The sea is calm at dawn, a pale sheet of silver where the sun is just beginning to peel the mist away. It's almost too calm, which should be your first warning. Sailors don't trust silence, it carries the weight of something waiting. And then, as if conjured by your suspicion, a dark triangle of sails blooms on the horizon. They're not. Friendly, they never are. The alarm ripples through the deck faster than words can form. Boots hammer the planks, ropes thud against wood, and men shout half sentences that somehow make sense to one another. The ship feels alive, every line groaning, every mast straining. You find yourself gripping the railing, heart thudding harder than the waves themselves. Boredom dies quickly at sea. Danger always arrives before you're ready to greet it. By mid-morning, the ships are close enough to taste. Gun ports yawning open, black mouths ready to spit fire. The air thickens, and then the first cannon booms, rolling across the water like thunder made of iron. The shot misses, kicking up a tower of spray, but the message is clear. There will be no polite negotiations today. Powder smoke swirls, acrid and choking, until it seems you're breathing through a curtain of ash. The deck jumps beneath you with every recoil, planks trembling as cannons spit flame. Men bark orders hoarse, their voices cracking in the chaos. One slips, sliding in a smear of tar, and laughs like a lunatic even as he scrambles back to his post. War at sea turns everyone mad within minutes. You lean over the rail just as grape shot sides the air, splinters exploding from wood in wicked showers. The smell burnt powder mixed with salt sprays, something you never forget. And worse, the screams. They don't echo the way they do on land. At sea, they vanish into the endless sky, swallowed too quickly, leaving only silence and the slap of waves. There's a moment of almost surreal beauty when the enemy's broadside fires, each cannon flashing like a line of lightning bolts. For a heartbeat, the world is framed in fire and smoke, as if the horizon itself is breaking apart. And then, just as quickly, reality crashes, backshouts, crashes, the sting of smoke in your eyes. Did you know some pirate crews deliberately avoided using heavy cannon, preferring speed and intimidation over firepower? They would hang tar-soaked ropes lit with smoke, creating the illusion of more guns than they had. Historians still debate whether this clever deception worked often, or whether it was simply the kind of tricks sailors told each other in taverns, to make danger sound like wit. But today, there is no illusion. The clash is brutal. The ships close, boards slamming together with a sound like mountains colliding. Hooks bite into railings, ropes lash across gaps, and suddenly it isn't about distance anymore. Steel meets steel, breath meets breath. And you realize sea battles aren't fought between ships at all, they're fought between bodies, clashing like waves themselves. You stumble forward, half pushed, half pulled, and for one strange instant, you notice how absurd it all is. Men risking life and limb for crates of cloth or barrels of sugar. Somewhere, a noble will sip sweet tea thanks to this madness. You almost laugh. Almost. A man swings across on a rope, hair flying, face wild. He lands awkwardly, loses his sword, and still somehow manages to tackle one of your mates with more enthusiasm than skill. You catch yourself smiling, because it feels less like battle and more like a tavern brawl that forgot to end when the drinks ran out. The sea has a way of making tragedy ridiculous. The fight drags on, but eventually someone yields. A flag drops, or perhaps it's simply that too many lie silent on the deck to continue. The air clears slowly, revealing broken masts, torn sails, and the floating wreckage of all that fury. You breathe deeply, though the air is still thick with smoke, and your lungs ache from it. The sea around you, so calm this morning, is now littered with debris-splintered wood, shattered barrels. Hats bobbing like forgotten toys dot, and then, just like that, silence creeps back. A gull wheels overhead, indifferent. The sea carries on, never much caring whether men live or die upon it. You wipe your face, tasting powder on your lips, and realize again that battles at sea are never about glory. They're about survival. And sometimes survival is the greatest treasure you'll ever win. The guns have gone quiet, and with them your heartbeat finally slows. But victory, if you can call it that, doesn't taste like triumph. It tastes like stale water, damp bread, and the endless roll of the sea. The irony is sharp. Treasure is rare, boredom is constant, and seasickness never truly ends. You think you've earned a chest of gold. No, what you've earned is another night of rocking hammocks and another morning of biscuits so hard they could chip a tooth. The days blur together now, stitched only by the rhythm of bells and the creak of wood. Sometimes it feels like you're trapped inside an old clock, ticking forever but never reaching an hour that matters. The most common event, strangely enough, isn't a mutiny or storm it's waiting. Long stretches where men sit cross-legged. On deck, carving bits of wood into crude figures, darning socks with hands still shaking from the last fight. You almost laugh at how absurd it is. You cross oceans, face death, only to spend your glory days sewing holes shut. The scene itself is almost comical. A line of hardened sailors, men who shouted through cannon fire, now huddled in the shade of the sailcloth, squinting at needles. One curses when he pricks his finger. Another hums tunelessly while patching trousers. Someone else scratches a little song onto a fiddle that's missing 2 strings. The deck smells of tar, brine, and a faint, sour temps of fish guts that somehow never leaves, no matter how much the sea washes over it. And above, gulls cry, as if mocking you, free creatures, circling endlessly, never bound to any deck. There's a little-known truth whispered among crews. Seasickness never really disappears. Even men who've spent 20 years afloat confess. They wake at night with a stomach lurch, a moment when the world tilts too far. They learn to hide it, to chew on lemon rind or pretend it's just hunger, but it clings to them like damp clothes. You realize then that the sea demands more than sweat or blooded, demands your balance, your very sense of self. Still, the irony piles up. One day, you're clutching the railing, cursing the waves for tossing you about. The next, when the sea lies flat as glass, you're cursing the stillness instead. Boredom gnaws harder than hunger, and no amount of dice games or tall tales seems to fill the hours. Someone once claimed you could tell time by how quickly a man grows sick of his neighbor's stories. By that measure, eternity has already passed. Historians still debate whether sailors truly went mad from the monotony, or if their antics were simply the natural release of men penned in too long together. Either way, it doesn't matter much to you. You've seen the madness firsthand. Men tying live crabs to their hats just to get a laugh, or staging mock trials where a half-empty rum barrel plays the role of guilty pirate. The punishment, of course, is always the same: menting the barrel. Justice at sea is nothing if not efficient, and you can't help but notice how the sea seems to delight in irony. A man who brags the loudest about his iron stomach is always the first to turn green when the swells rise. The cook, who can stew salt beef into something barely edible, is also the one most often found sleeping with his head against the flour sacks, dreaming of bakeries ashore. And you swore once you'd never miss land. Now, the thought of solid ground feels like heaven itself. Even if that ground is muddy, uneven, and smells faintly of manure, you find yourself staring out at the horizon more often, where the sky and sea blur into a line so thin it barely exists. It mocks you, the horizon always ahead, never closer. Some days it feels like chasing smoke, other days like chasing your own shadow. Still, the ship keeps cutting forward, planks creaking, sails snapping, men coughing, laughing, swearing. Life goes on, because what else can it do? And so, irony becomes the only constant companion. You left shore dreaming of freedom, only to find yourself bound tighter than ever to ropes, to routines, to the unpredictable moods of the ocean. You fight for treasure, but find instead splinters, bruises, and stories you'll never quite believe yourself when you tell them later. The sea gives, the sea takes, and most days it mostly just takes. Yet here you are, breathing, swaying with the deck, staring at a horizon that won't move. You almost smile, because perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. The sea strips you bare, grinds you down, bores you to despair and still. You can't imagine leaving it behind. The sea does not roar tonight. It sighs. The waves slap against it. The wood in a rhythm you have grown too familiar with. Like a tired heart beating on you stand at the rail. Or maybe you just slump against it, eyes tracing the dark horizon where the sky melts into water. For weeks, months, maybe years, you have been waiting for something extraordinary, chest of gold, a heroic tale, a reason why you left land in the first place. But the truth is far less glamorous. Treasure, rare, boredom, constant, and seasickness. Oh, that old companion never quite leaves, just waiting for the ship to sway the wrong way before reminding you of your fragile stomach. Common knowledge says sailors always dream of land, of taverns and clean beds. And yes, you dream of that, too. But you also know the odd silence that follows a storm. The way the whole crew looks at each other after surviving another night, realizing they are still here. It is not celebration, not exactly relief either, but something in between. That feeling of being alive when the odds were against you, that is more intoxicating than rum. Tonight, the crew lingers in scattered groups. A few hum broken songs, voices raspy but soft, carrying on the salt-stiff air. One man sharpens his knife out of habit, the metal rasping against stone, though you notice his eyes drift far more than his hand moves. Another scratches a crude carving into wood, perhaps a face, perhaps just shapes that mean something only to him. The lantern light swings overhead, shadows stretching long, then snapping back short, as if mocking the men below. You look up at the sails patched so many times that they resemble a quilt stitched by reluctant hands. And yet, somehow, this floating wooden skeleton still carries you all. Historians still argue about whether pirate ships were truly death traps or surprisingly well-run machines of survival. You would probably laugh at that if you had the energy. Death trap, yes, well-run sometimes. Mostly you're just amazed the whole thing doesn't collapse under the weight of its own irony. A lesser-known truth drifts in with the night. Pirates did not only fear Navy ships or rival crews, they feared boredom more. Idle men on rolling wood with nothing to do could turn crueler than any storm. And so odd rituals appeared. Gambling with dice made of bone, mock trials where the guilty was sentenced to mop the deck twice, or the strange ceremony of tossing old boots overboard just to watch them sink. You find yourself smiling at the memory of last week's boot funeral, which grew absurdly solemn until someone ruined it by tripping over the bucket. You lean back, breathing the damp air. The taste of salt clings to your lips, not unpleasant. Any more, just part of your mouth like a second skin. In the distance, lightning flickers faintly, but no thunder follows. Maybe a storm is too tired to reach you. Maybe the sea pities you tonight. And here you are, caught between wanting land and fearing it. Because what waits there? Laws, hangman, disappointment. On the water, at least you know your enemies. You can hear their cannons. On land, the enemy smiles first. A cruel paradox. But then again, life seems to enjoy mocking you at every turn. One of the younger men laughs, suddenly, startling the rest. He has been chewing on a splinter, as if it were a fine toothpick, and declares loudly that it tastes better than yesterday's bread. A round of half-hearted chuckles follows. You find yourself laughing too, quietly, because he isn't wrong. Humor becomes survival, a shield as sturdy as any plank. And so the night deepens. The stars scatter wide above, too many to count, too bright to ignore. You wonder if they are laughing too, watching little humans play at war, chasing coins across endless water. You almost ask them aloud, but stop yourself better not to give the crew another reason to call you mad. The ship rocks. The sea breathes. You close your eyes for a moment, and when you open them again, it feels like everything is softer, slower. Maybe you are slipping into that half-dream space, where voices blur, where the smell of tar and rope fades, where the harsh edges of life melt into something that doesn't hurt as much. And it is here that the lullaby begins. Breathe with the ship now. In as the waves swell, out as they slide away. The deck moves beneath you, gentle this time, not cruel. It rocks you like a cradle, like a tired parent shushing a restless child. The lantern light dims in your mind, flickering softer until it becomes only a warm glow behind your eyelids. The laughter fades too, carried off by the wind, until it is only memory, light and distant. You no longer hear the ropes creak or the sails whisper, only the hush of the sea, steady, constant. Wrapping around you like a blanket dot, see the horizon. Blur, as though the stars are dipping lower to meet the water. They stretch into long lines of silver, shimmering, dissolving. You do not need to chase them. They come to you. The sea folds into velvet, dark and endless, and you sink into it, but gently, without fear. Your body is heavy, yet safe. Your breath slows, as if the air itself has thickened, soothing you, keeping you. The images of storms, battles, sickness, hunger, they loosen their grip. They drift away, like smoke carried off by morning breeze. All that remains is the rhythm. Inhale, exhale, wave, hush. You are no longer standing on wood. You are floating in quiet, floating in calm, floating where nothing hurts and nothing presses. The sea does not demand tonight. It cradles, it hums. Stay here, let your eyes close fully. Let the water hold you. Let the stars keep their watch above. You do not need to do anything more. The night carries you now. Sleep takes the helm. And in this silence, you rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.